Kia ora tātou, nā mihi nui ki te tangata whenua o te motu o Aotearoa, me tangata Pacifica o te Mona Nui a Kiwa, nā mihi ki te whānau o West Papua, tangata Tiriti katoa, nā mihi, nā mihi. Welcome to our webinar and on racism and West Papua self-determination, and Kerry Tabuni from West Papua is going to open with his statement.
Kina ona, narewinam, nala maninam, nova maninam, gaman gi, niwane yugi me, ambigin again on gi ganok, kinal again, abawai o kirei, de niwane yi, satu yam that day yugun me, yugunigak, andogin yun gi ganok, pipa kin yin lo bakit nu, awanek aloner, Yime ninum arugunin genabawai o kirei wa. Wow.
Thank you, Kerry. Welcome everybody. I'm Catherine Delahunty. I'm chairing this session on racism and the West Papua self-determination struggle. And with me, I have Kerry Tabuni from West Papua and Leilani Salesa from Oceania Interrupted in Tamaki. We'd just like to make sure that you know you're in the right place. You're in the West Papua presentation. In terms of housekeeping, we have great technical support here from Grace and Jeff. And what that means is that if you want to ask a question, you go to the chat place on your Zoom page, and those questions will be forwarded to us. What we're planning to do, people, is to have some kōrero from Kerry and Leilani, and then some space for questions. So we'll probably do about 20 minutes, half an hour of talking, and then we're happy to have discussion. I'm possibly going to participate a bit more than the chair usually does because Leilani says I need to. So it's important that, because we're an activist group, we're not academics studying this topic. Kerry is a Papuan living this issue, and Leilani and I are part of the Solidarity Network. So we're analysing the racism in the context of our experience as activists, and in Kerry's case, as lived experience. So I wondered if, well, the other things you need to know, there is a moderator. So Grace is our moderator to make sure the discussion stays on point and is courteous and respectful. And we will shortly just go ahead, but first I'd just like to ask Kerry, would you just like to introduce yourself so people know a little bit about you, and then Leilani? Thanks, Kerry.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Kia ora, ta lava, and the Pacific greetings. So once more, I welcome you with my own language, wa. So my name is Kerry Tabuni. I'm originally from the West Papua, especially in the Central Highlands, called Wamena. It's also my biggest tribe, my biggest iwi. And my small iwi, small hapu called the Muruk Tabuni or Guinea. And I'm from the Tabuni whānau. I'm here for study. I'm currently just doing my further studies at Waikato University. I'm doing international law, focusing on international human rights law, focusing on more the indigenous issues happening in the Pacific. In my focus studies is the West Papuan issue as one of the legal issues. So my patients, I'm going through this academic legal path that I've chosen, so I'm really passionate about to do that. So, and I'm really grateful to be part of this panel as well. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Kerry. Talofa Leilani, would you like to give us your little bit of background?
Talofa lava. Ko waia te maunga, ko te moana nui a kiwa te moana, ko Ngāti Hā me o ku Ngāti Pākehā, ko Ngāti Hā me Ngāti Pākehā o ku iwi, ko Aotearoa nei. Talofa lava, malo lelei, Namaste, my name is Leilani Salesa. I'm a member of a group, an Auckland-based, a Tamaki-based collective of women called Oceania Interrupted. We formed in 2013, and what we aim to do is to raise awareness in amongst Pacific communities about the struggle of the West Papuan people to be free. Kia ora everybody, thank you for joining us this morning.
Talofa lava, and thank you, Korua, for your very clear introductions. So we're going to start with just some discussion about the way in which racism is used as a tool in colonisation in a particular context. So it could be Aotearoa, but this morning it's West Papua, and we think that there are some interesting lessons and parallels. So I might just ask our team if they wanted to start with you, Kerry. How in your experience does racism feature in the struggle of your country?
The racism, if we can see from the history, it started from the colonial minds. And so wherever the colonialists exist, the racism is there. So it's kind of, I support the idea of this racism is the institutional, the people who can benefit from that. So in West Papua, I believe there's a lot of the racism that we indigenous people are faced. You know, if West Papua being colonized by other, that's the racist. I mean, we can say the racism, because that's the race is driven by, I mean, the colonial is driven by that racist minds. So, you know, people, my experience in West Papua, a lot of people are being marginalized economically, and it's clear everywhere, and we have never get any benefit from that. But if you go to West Papua and see a lot of good, very fancy buildings, and we have no labor opportunity as well. So we can see that's a lot of, you know, the practice of racism is can be seen in West Papua. So a lot of people in West Papua themselves, they kind of don't understand that practice. For example, we can see that Papuan, we have nearly 300 different languages. So the language, for example, people not really tend to speak their own language. They consider like, oh, for example, if I'm speaking my own language, people can consider, hey, it's a village boy. It's not, oh, that's this guy from the village. So, you know, that's a mindset being planted that many people don't understand in West Papua. Right.
Thank you. Leilani, do you want to comment just as Oceania Interrupted's experience of how racist this colonial process in Papua is, from your experience as a solidarity person?
I think from, and I speak on behalf of on behalf of myself, but also representative of the women at the nucleus of our collective, we know that racism is a justification for colonization, full stop. And so if we know these things about West Papua, we know that it has the world's largest gold mine, the world's third largest copper mine, full stop. Those are indisputable facts. We know that the West Papuan people have the lowest rate of, they have the poorest health outcomes in the Asia Pacific region. So if they come from a land that is full of mineral resources and has all this economic opportunity, why is it then that the outcomes for the West Papuan people are so very, very dire and so very, very poor? We know that Indonesia is holding fast to West Papua because of, I mean, there are other reasons in terms of what the colonizer does. They seek absolute power and control over their subjects. But we know that the West Papua represents a third of the GDP of the Indonesian economy. So when we make those kind of correlations, we know that racism is real, racism is active, and we can see the parallels between West Papua and Aotearoa New Zealand. Just thinking about what we're currently faced with in COVID-19, you know, the rate of response for Māori and the health outcomes for Māori, we're hearing on the news Māori are giving voice to their own struggle and saying we are not getting a just and fair share of the pie. Just imagine West Papuan people don't have the same platform and have the same voice. Imagine if COVID-19 was to decimate a community, like there should be a response, but I'm wondering what that might look like in the current climate when we know that the health, access to healthcare is already so poor in West Papua. So, yeah.
Thank you, guys. One thing I forgot to do, I was going to get Kerry to just give us a little rundown on West Papua, where it is, and what the current, like how we've got to this position where we're talking about a self-determination struggle. So, Kerry, do you just want to perhaps just give us just like a couple of minutes on, for people who don't know, the difference between West Papua and Papua New Guinea, just that kind of corridor, and then we'll come back to the topic.
Yeah, I think it's really important to know the people. I mean, myself as the Pacific person, I mean, I'm from the Pacific. I know where I live. I know where I come from. It's important that the West Papua, a lot of myself is, I'm a little bit embarrassed when I introduce myself and then people say, oh, it's Papua New Guinea. No, it's not Papua New Guinea. But we are from the island called the New Guinea Islands. So Papua New Guinea is the eastern half of the island. So the New Guinea Islands only the biggest island in the Pacific. And the western half, it's where I come from, called West Papua. And so it's still Indonesian control in West Papua. So the eastern half is called West Papua and the western half called West Papua. So, you know, the history is important, I think. The New Guinea Island became the imperial struggle among the European colonizations. The eastern half controlled by the British and Australia, the Papua New Guinea, and Australia, they gave them independence in 57. But West Papua, under the Dutch colony, I think the people of West Papua don't like to say that we colonized by the Dutch, because we didn't. I mean, the Dutch didn't. At the same time, the Indonesia archipelago under the Dutch administration, under the Dutch colony, in 1949, after the Dutch recognized Indonesian sovereignty, the Dutch did not live directly to the whole land. They decided to remain in West Papua. Why? Because they know we, the West Papuan, have no racial connection to the Indonesia. They are the Asian. I'm not racist, but this is based on the biological appearance. I mean, so that we are Melanesians. So they prepared us for independence in 1960s, but then Indonesia don't agree that West Papua should be under the Dutch colony. They're trying to get the land to be part of Indonesia. And then Indonesia went to the Soviet Union for support, which they again support with the military equipment to battle against the Dutch in West Papua. So America saw this process, and the US kind of concerned about the potential expand of the communist in the Asia, Southeast Asia. And so that's why the America actually involved to force the Dutch to take, transfer the territory to Indonesia. That's what happened. So at the same time, the New Zealand, very quiet, I think. Australia actually, initially it supported the Dutch position, were preparing people for independence. But then since the US involved in the crisis, the Australia backed the US decision, so that unfortunately West Papua been transferred to Indonesia. So since the West Papuans, they not really, they were happy under the Dutch because they became the instrument to become a nation. So they really welcome and they happy to be part of that preparations. But then since someone else came in, they don't really happy. And in response to that, the human rights violations, a lot of racism still going on since 1960s until the present.
Thank you. That's very clear. Yeah, I think it's useful because we don't talk about this, even though West Papua are neighbours. So I guess coming back to the topic of racism, either of you, do you think that one of the reasons the New Zealand government and others historically, and this is all well documented in Māori Ledbetter's book, See No Evil, which is a great read, which Leilani's holding up, this gives you the history of our own shameful relationships and others.
I've got mine too.
Yeah, she's our hero, Māori.
Yeah.
I wondered if you could comment on the historical, how the different layers, like how both in the past and now, people's racism around the world has allowed this terrible situation to continue. Lani, did you want to comment a bit about that?
I guess from my perspective, one thing that we've really dealt with is the working from in the position of working from, Tamaki, Auckland, and an Aotearoa New Zealand context is the Polynesian-Melanesian divide. Auckland being not really a Polynesian city, so anyone who says that is telling a lie. But there are Polynesian cities within Auckland. We know their names, Otara, Mangere. But us being Māori, Samoan, and Tongan in the majority, often in our own communities, not really seeing that that connection to the Pacific, in the sense that it stretches so far as maybe one generation into the New Zealand's Pacific, so the countries that New Zealand is directly related to because of our whakapapa to those countries. But even getting Samoans in my own life to see there is a direct link between the situation with Samoa as a colony of New Zealand to West Papua as a colony of Indonesia, and people not really understanding, people being really uncomfortable, and these are Pacific people, with facing up to the fact that, colonization in the Pacific isn't past tense. We all live with the consequences of it. We sometimes understand them to be normal and therefore normalized, but more in seeing the story of West Papua as inextricably connected to our own struggles. And I think because, there are no West Papuan All Blacks, that conversation around nationalism is, and those kind of connections gets a bit lost sometimes. So I guess with what the work that Oceania Interrupted has tried to do is to try and, through using visual art and art as interruption, you can go into our Facebook page and see what our interruptions or our look like. So those are our artistic performances. Is trying to get people to relate everything in space, to understand that, West Papuans are Pacific people. They are literally the western half of the island of New Guinea. There is no argument with anyone of a sound mind who's got a brain and two eyes. If you look at a map, West Papua's neighbours are literally, they literally border with Papua New Guinea. So they are a Pacific island. We are a sea of islands. We are all connected. And I think it's getting people to kind of understand that, and I guess before that to care with to kind of align the heart and the mind to work together. Yeah.
Oh, talofa, thank you. Maybe before I come back to you, Kerry, with the permission of the group, if I could make one comment myself, which is Western racism has been a big part of the story. I believe that one of the reasons our government, Australia and the West, has ignored this issue, apart from the economic benefits of raping the West Papuan resources, is that basically Stone Age people, Kōrero, seen these people as lesser than us. The Australians referred to Papuans as the fuzzy wuzzy angels during World War II because they saved many, many Australian lives, but that was the patronising racist way in which the fuzzy wuzzy angels tells you everything about how Australia viewed the actual people who were saving their lives. So I think it's an inherent white racism has a big part to play. But I'll go to Kerry. Do you think, I'm interested in Kerry, you know, in any reflection you have about what it does in daily life to people to be told that they are not as good as their colonizing masters. What effects, because you touched on that a little bit, saying people were just from the village and so language wasn't respected as much. What other effects do you think daily racism at every level happens to people in Papua?
After I realized, after I coming here in New Zealand to study, and I realized that my mind is kind of open up that kind of the colonial power that controlling the indigenous peoples.
Right.
You see, I'm not agree with everything that's happening in West Papua. But for example, I could say, if someone like myself or any West Papuans speak about the West Papua, from people from West Papua itself, within themselves, like, oh, this person is a criminal, or they kind of labeling them like bad people. It is not. People, they are speaking about West Papua. It's not only the struggle, or they fight not only for political freedoms, but they're speaking to defend for their identity.
Right. So do you think possibly that kind of, because of the racism of the Indonesian state, that they encourage, it's a divide and rule strategy to, you know, to see your own people as a problem?
A lot of undermining to addressing to West Papua. So that's why the people came into the regions kind of, the local people kind of incapable to do this. So when you go to the store, there is no any local people working in the store. All you see of the people who are migrated to the regions in the store. Then this is the fact actually the West Papuan themselves don't see really well.
Right.
Actually they deserve the economic benefit from that. So if the Indonesia, the fact that the West Papua still it's Indonesian province, and so if Indonesia claims that West Papua is Indonesia, and their obligations is make the West Papuan capable to do their own things, and why they we can question why the people of West Papua, in fact, that the lowest rate of the West Papua is one of the lowest rate, the poorest region in Indonesia. So that's a shameful. That's a fact. I mean, so the people actually don't understand really well about this reality.
Could I just ask you, when the Takaya Māori television crew went to Papua and went to Wamena, I believe, where you're from, or part of you is from, I understood they were told that growing your native plant like the kumara, your sweet potato, that if you eat that, your children, and you feed your children on that, they'll be stupid, whereas if they eat rice, they'd be intelligent. Would that be something that's familiar to you, that kind of racist attack on your cultural food and your way of life?
Yeah, excuse me. As I described, you know, people with I see, I'm always saying this is the colonial minds. I mean, how they control everything.
Yeah.
Like they introduced during the process of the Act of Free Choice in 1960s, they introduced the rice as the modern food. They said, you eat this modern food, this is good. The sweet potato is not good. But you know, this one of the examples. So people have to understand that this, coming here in New Zealand, I can see how there are really good people out there, a lot of them here in New Zealand, and also back in West Papua, even the Indonesians, they're really good people over there. So how can we promote the value of the local cultures, including the food and everything that they have left by the ancestors? The people like this is I think the West Papua need to understand this. For example, the language is something that we need to promote. In my plan is I'm doing my research about this as well. So I'm going there to campaign for identifying the issues like this, and then going back to the roots where we can encourage people to teach their children about their own language, and also how important they connect to their identity and their traditions. So that's I think it's important.
Thank you. I wondered, Leilani, if you wanted to comment on just the issue of the racism that you've seen. You've met a lot of Papuans when we've toured them, and they've traveled around the country. And I just wondered with connection to them, what you've learned from them. And also I'd like to start talking about that incident that happened that's led to such terrible violence with the dehumanization of people, the monkeys incident, which took place with the students and has led to greater violence by Indonesia. So if you just wanted to have a little reflect on that.
Sorry, what was the first question, Catherine?
Just what you learned about the racism. I mean, obviously growing up as a person, a Pacifica person in Aotearoa, you know about it already, but you know, when we've had visits from people such as Octo, Mote, Benny Wenda, Rex Rumakek, Paula Makabori, just any learnings around their experience in the context.
So I think, I mean, the one thing that springs to mind is racism is real. And yes, we have yes, we have those face-to-face instances in Aotearoa New Zealand where two people of different one person from another culture might look at another person from another culture and say something offensive. I think something from Papa Rex Rumakek springs to mind. And it makes me think about the vicious, the ferocious, and the vile nature of racism and what that means for West Papuan people. He talked to me when we presented at an Amnesty International at the Auckland office. He shared with us a story about how at any given time, the Bree Mob or whatever special force organization within West Papua that is, you know, manned by indigenous peoples can come into your village and can accuse someone of a crime and can torture them in front of you. Like, you know, I can only imagine what that's like. And from my experience of speaking with West Papuan people, they say some words about the hurt that is inside, and those words are enough. Those words will reduce you to tears because you just cannot imagine watching the abuse, the horror, and the torture happen to your family and know that there is no one you can go to who will help you. So when we talk about racism, I know that there is a lot of economic and capitalist thinking that kind of underlines the reasons why nation states want to colonize West Papua and take their resources. But I think when you travel along in time and space and when you see that how that affects generations of people, Benny Wenda spoke about having to flee within the jungle, about how, you know, agents were used to strip away the foliage of the forest so they could be bombed. I mean, and this isn't something that happened 100 years ago. You know, this is within the last 45, 50 years within living memory in the Pacific. And these are horrible, terrible, awful things, and they are done by the Indonesian state, and they are not held to account by the world, and they keep happening. And I guess the different thing that has happened now is around social media, and with the work that Oceania Interrupted has done, you know, now our ocean is connected through social media. Just last year, around the incident that happened at the university, Cendrawasih, and we saw footage of the students who were escorted out of church. Within minutes, we are connected to West Papuan activists who are on the ground, and they are telling us what is happening, and, you know, in real time. So I think there's always hope, but what we are seeing in West Papua in terms of in the Pacific is not often spoken about. And I've always been puzzled why journalists don't just do a better job. Because we're telling, you know, all of these things that are happening in a global scale in nations that are far away, are given pages in our newspapers and a given room in our radio stations. But what about West Papua? Literally, people are dying and they are crying for their freedom. So there is always hope. And I'm just thinking, from what I've learned about the United Liberation Movement for a Free West Papua, as we've hosted them, is the rise in the nationalism around West Papuans. You know, such an amazing place, the island of New Guinea, and some of the world's oldest cultures and oldest languages, and this incredible biodiversity and this richness. And what's happened, you know, since the 1960s, since the Act of No Choice, since the unification talks that were held in Vanuatu, the rise in nationalism, like West Papua, one people, one soul, and how that, maybe Kerry can comment about how that's given a, you know, a unifying discourse to nationalism, and how West Papuan people can really come together, and because they are one and the same, one heart, one soul. What do you reckon, Kerry?
Sure. You know, West Papua has, very true, but West Papua has a long history of tension, beginning from the rejection of the New York Agreement in 1962. The people started to against that agreement because in the agreements, the negotiation process, all the indigenous people have been sidelined in that process. So it's the same thing happened and in leading up to the Act of Free Choice in 1962. The many academics says Act of No Choice. So I can see the people are continue to struggle. The recent tension in Surabaya that we're talking about here, it's just kind of, it's part of the accumulations of those racism, the discriminations, the violence, the human rights, all those. So since 1960s, the people are, if you go to the villages and ask one of the little kids in the primary school and asking them, what is your language? I mean, what is your national flag? They will say, they will not say the red and white or merah putih Indonesian flag. They will say the Morning Star flag. Is that what? Yeah, that's what they will say. I mean, you know, it's the history without taught in the curriculum. It's grown by itself within the indigenous peoples because it's a truth. I mean, it's their identity. We cannot hide even the colonial power cannot hide that because it's coming from within our from the indigenous people. So it can grow. Even now, people are realizing, oh, yeah, true, this is wrong. So people like, a lot of people are being educated themselves. And even the Indonesian people, a lot of people support and kind of condemning the government upon the lot of violence committed by the states. It's really, the support is growing. So the people, the West Papua struggle is long struggle, not only now. So it's kind of coming, the racism also kind of driving up to the people to voice their right to asking for, demanding for self-determination.
Catherine, I was wondering if I could maybe get you to comment on, from your experience as a member of parliament and from your deep insight into the political situation, I'm just thinking about the visiting general to the police college.
Yeah.
Comment on that?
Sure. I think that links to one of my thoughts about what Kerry's just said about racism and how it's long-term, it's structural and deliberate. And when we think about the incident in Surabaya where they probably deliberately called the students monkeys in order to cause a fight and deliberately try and give them an excuse to attack those students. The calling of human beings as animals is a deliberate strategy, and I think it's part of a strategy that really benefits Indonesia's position, although as Kerry just said, increasing number, and I think you said too, Leilani, the increasing number of young Indonesians are actually are learning the history despite the curriculum. So that was excellent point, Kerry. So what happened with an Indonesian general was invited to visit Aotearoa to study, basically to study how Māori economic development was being fostered here. And I found that very interesting. And he was at the Indonesian Friendship Group, which strangely, I wasn't a member of the Indonesian Friendship Group at Parliament. I was the coordinator of the Free West Papua group, but I went along to this thing. I forced my way in. And this Indonesian general, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, was probably the scariest person I've ever met. His history was associated with East Timor, Aceh, with serious military violence. And when I said to him, what about the indigenous people of West Papua? He said to me, there are none. They don't exist. And this also was an interesting discussion with the Indonesian commissioner, High Commissioner, or ambassador, I always forget the proper names for them, who I also met with. And these people denial, as part of their sort of agreed messaging when they're visiting other countries, is that that West Papuan people are not indigenous. They're just part of the Indonesian empire, and we have diversity, but we're not indigenous. And I thought that his point was, he just looked at me and said, they don't exist. And there was a wall there beyond which he wasn't going to go. So there was no way of discussing, even though he'd come to Aotearoa to study the Maoris or whatever he thought he was doing, not recognising tangata whenua we are bound to respect them as rangatira through treaty. They have this idea that if we keep telling, on the one hand, they'll call you Stone Age people, Kerry. On the other hand, you don't exist at all. so to me, that's part of the whole strategy of it. And it was at the highest level. So it was at that structural level that the military, they want to eliminate. I think another webinar talked about symbolic annihilation. You face actual annihilation, but they also want symbolic annihilation. So that monkeys incident, like what's that done, what do you think that does every time people are dehumanized? What do you think that does? Does it make them stronger, or does it actually, I mean, they must be using the strategy for a reason.
But just take, it is, I mean, we are living in the 21st century, right?
Yeah.
So we are not living in the 18th century, 19th century, 20th century, the 21st century, where we are indigenous people. We have the place in the global arena to express our rights as a people. So we are the people. We are the human beings just like themselves.
Yeah.
So our right to demand everything we ask should be respected.
Yeah.
So in terms of dehumanizing people, I think that's one of the colonial minds. They come with their mindset to kind of trying to define indigenous people by their language, by their the system, the rules. But like I said, here we are in the 21st century. It's we kind of understanding who we are, and it's a growing issue in the global discussions like we are having now. The indigenous peoples are having their place, and it should be respected. As also, I think that each, including Indonesians, each country adopted the Declaration of Human Rights, and also the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, where the state also signed of the declaration. So I think the states have the obligations to practice the international standards to the indigenous people. So it is not the time to say, yeah, there is no indigenous people.
That's right.
That's what they say. This is the governments. If you want to ask, go and talk to the indigenous people, not the governments. So we are the exist indigenous people, not only West Papuan, but all of the world, including here in Aotearoa as well. So we are becoming. I mean, I think there is a hope for indigenous people as the issues rise in all over the world, and therefore is coming together, and the people like yourself, Catherine, and other people the support all this idea of the indigenous existence.
Cool. So, I think what I might do now, because time's passing, is go to a question. So both of you feel free to comment on this one, because I think they're good questions. One was to you, Kerry, specifically, but I think it's an interesting kōrero from both of you. Their question was, Ngā mihi kia koutou, Kerry, further to your excellent point about being of Pacific and identifying as Melanesian, what is your view on the word Pacifica? So I'm not sure whether you'd like to start, and then Leilani, what your view of the word Pacifica is for the person who asked the question.
For me, I think it is really important for this age, the young generations coming up and kind of gaining, I mean, reclaiming their identity as a Pacifica. I mean, it's so that they're speaking about the Pacifica, it's not only Samoa or Tonga or Tuvalu or Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Fiji, but it's all of them. There's the Melanesians in the West Papua, it's part of the Pacific. The PNG is a part of the Pacific. So we are these three different ethnic groups in the Pacific, the Melanesian, Polynesian, and Micronations. And this is us. So kind of, it is really meant when I come here in New Zealand and see other brothers from the other islands in the Pacific, I see that it is my connection to them, because I feel like I belong to the right place here in I'm the Pacific. So my kind of my feeling is I feel connected even here in New Zealand as well with the Maori. So I think it's really neat to reconnect our connection as a Pacifica people between all these three groups.
Wonderful. Leilani, do you want to comment on the word Pacifica?
It's a really interesting term, Pacifica. Pacifica, 30 years ago in New Zealand schools, there was no Pacifica. Right. You know, there were Samoans, Tongans, Cook Islanders and Niueans, people who were formerly part of the New Zealand's empire. But as we fast forward now, I think of the late Epeli Hauofa, Professor Epeli Hauofa, and how he talked about how we are not, the Pacific is not islands in a far sea, but we're a sea of islands. And I think even though it's important to remember that we are all connected, oceans were our highways, where our ancestors journeyed. When the peoples of Europe were hugging the coast, there we were, space age exploration over the ocean. Those are the people I think of as Pacifica. They are, you know, like Kerry said, Melanesian, Micronesian, and Polynesian. We use those terms as terms of convenience because they are not terms of our making. But in terms of the ownership of the word Pacifica, when we stage an artistic intervention for Oceania Interrupted, or when we hold an event like the December 1st flag raising, where Kerry and Catherine were there at Orake Marae in 2019, to me, that event is Pacifica. It is all of us in solidarity, working together. And, you know, Catherine, I extend my heart to you because there is always space within that term for Pākehā people to work, and it's a really fertile space because, and this is where I want to do a shout out to Catherine Delahunty and to Maire Ledbetter. They're two of my personal mentors, and they are women who have been working on the West Papuan solidarity struggle, you know, for so many years when there wasn't perhaps the same consciousness around the issue. And this makes me think, you know, just like in the treaties, the Te Tiriti, we have partners, we're all partnered in this. It's an activist movement, but everyone relates in that space, and that's how we bring about change.
Oh, kia ora, Leilani. A couple of other questions coming through. People are appreciating your kōrero and feeling the sadness too of what you've explained, Kerry. But also people saying geologically, once there was a Pacific continent, so maybe really the Pacific is a continent, the ocean is, maybe it's the 8th continent, and what might that be? As people defined by a body of water, not land, a continent is ocean. What term would you identify for the people of this continent? And I guess Pacifica might be one of them, but I'm happy to go there, or but also kind of quite keen to keep focusing on the racism issue as well.
I think we should call it Free West Papua Continent.
Merdeka, freedom.
I kind of jump into that's really comments. We, as I said, Catherine, you have explained your experience when one of the representatives of Indonesia came into the parliaments, and you saw that. So, you know, we are the Pacifica, right? So we three different groups that we mentioned: Melanesian, Polynesian, Micronesians. We are simply the people of the Pacific. Just said, full stop.
Yeah.
It's three different ethnic groups. Doesn't mean that we kind of classifying this belongs to you, but we are people of the oceans, the Pacific. That's a people of the Pacific. Full stop. No one can come in to define us as this is from this island, that island.
Yeah.
So that's it. Yeah.
I think coming back to racism, we see a lot of racism against Pacific people in Aotearoa, starting with one of our media commentators, Hela Duplessis Allen, who said that Pacific Islands were leech on New Zealand and didn't lose her job. So, you know, we do see that racism operates at all levels. And I guess looking at West Papua and what's happened in recent months, I'm looking for what are the learnings. The Indonesians used the incident with the students to anger the population and to bring in more military force. So I guess I'm thinking, where are the seeds of hope? And I've heard a bit from you too about solidarity and being allies and working together. But I guess for the last 10 minutes, we could talk about seeds of hope, but I've also got another question here someone's saying to you both, do you think that identifying a continent or the grouping of nations is another form of racism, making it convenient for outsider peoples to address us as people of the Pacific, i.e. Tonga before was not Tonga, but used to be named after, or the Cook Islands was named after Cook. But Tonga used to have a name for each of its islands. So is there a dangerous, I think the person's asking, do you think there's a danger in letting outsiders label you and then homogenize you, put you all into one box? Leilani?
I'm just thinking about, it's relative to who's doing it, right?
Yeah.
So homogenization in terms of, you know, the gaze and who doesn't have power, you know, the colonial gaze is not really beneficial for Indigenous peoples. But if you flip the script, homogenization in terms of West Papuan nationalism moving forward is really important, because West Papuans are rooted in the earth. They know their difference linguistically and culturally. A person from Wamena is not the same as a person from somewhere else. They're very different. But the homogenization of the discourse to be one people with one heart and one soul means that if you're all together, then you can be led, and you can lead your own kind of movement. So I think it depends who's doing what and when. But just thinking about the parallels between Pacifica people, Kerry, and Aotearoa, and in West Papua, when Heather Duplessis Allen, I shudder to even think her name, made that comment, I contacted some Pacific people who are in prominent positions, and I said, why don't you respond? Why don't you speak on our behalf? And one of them said something really powerful to me. They said, I don't make it my business to respond to fools. And so much of these kind of statements are people who take a Trump view of the truth. So New Zealand's economy, if you look at the money that that Samoa spends, for example, on buying goods and services from New Zealand, you couldn't possibly ever think that. But I think the truth is our most important weapon, and this, like Kerry was alluding to before. Like when I entered into that forum that I mentioned before, where I was the only Pacific person, excluding Pākehā, with a very ferocious Indonesian audience, when I was invited to speak by these two artists, the other Pacific woman in Oceania Interrupted refused from a moral standpoint. They said, I don't want to go into an audience where there are other, racist Indonesians. And then I thought of the Indonesian people, the West Papuan people I know in my life, and I thought about what they might say to me, and they say, go tell the truth. And so, the truth is always our weapon, because we are right. We should free West Papua. You should stop killing West Papuans. You should give them their freedom, and you should get out. It sounds really straightforward when you express it in 3 bullet points, but the truth is our weapon. And when we come up against people who bathe and soak in their own ignorance, and there are a bunch of them, sadly.
Well said, my friend. There's another part I hear. Kerry, do Indonesian diaspora communities in Aotearoa, do they support West Papua's independence?
I don't know, do they know the struggle? Because, as the Indonesian is one of the largest populations in the world, they don't know really much what's happening in one island to the other islands. It's Indonesia. I don't know people that living here in Aotearoa, they support or not. I don't really know how many of them are staying here. And but if common sense, we are here staying in the 21st century. We are indigenous people. We are accommodated by the international law. I believe if anyone can educate their minds really well, particularly the concerning the indigenous issues, we indigenous people have the right to self-determination. That it's said international law is guaranteed. And so if anyone kind of support that idea, because this comes from the internet.
Oh, we're frozen. I think we've just, Leilani's still alive, but I think Kerry might have frozen for a minute. Yeah. So perhaps we'll let the techies try to work on that. And Leilani, do you want to comment about the Indonesian communities that you've struck in Aotearoa?
I've kind of, I recognize that Indonesia as a nation state is not good now, or in the past, hasn't been good now or in the past to all of its communities and all of its ethnicities. And that's a really complex being, but we're talking about moving away, talking about the government and talking about our interactions with Indonesian people here in Aotearoa. I guess some have largely been hostile from my experience. And I want to bring this down into real time. when we have our interventions, when we raise the Morning Star flag, so that's what should be the national flag of West Papua. We organise an event, and part of that event is a performance in the kaihakari after that. So we call all of these Māori and Pacific women and all of our solidarity supporters together. We call them to come and bear witness to what we see as us doing this act of solidarity on December the 1st. So we've had experiences where we've had all these Māori and Pacific women about to perform, and then we've had Indonesian students come to our event. Now, we have to, and this is the difficult thing for people, I think, in Aotearoa to think, in West Papua, if you raise the Morning Star flag, you or your whānau could get killed or hurt. Like, this is the way it has been within, you know, every year there are killings that are associated with the rise of the Morning Star flag. So when we have an Indonesian student who, you know, in my mind has been sent by the embassy to have a look and see who's there, and when we have a West Papuan presence of West Papuans, you know, it's not a good feeling. And I'll be honest with you, I've asked them to leave. I've said that, you know, people who represent what you seem to believe in and what we seem to believe in don't get on well, and it ends poorly for people on our side. So I think some people have thought I've overreacted in the past, but I stand by our actions that we need to keep everyone safe. And this is, you know, this is not an absurd thing. This is grounded in actual fact and actual history.
Yeah. I'd just like to also add to that, if that's okay, that I have noticed a change in the last 3 or 4 years, where previously Indonesian students were sent to disrupt our meetings, sent to sabotage our efforts, and that they're always still monitoring us. But there are now a group of younger people from Indonesia studying in Aotearoa, and Kerry, you may know some at the university, who actually have been a bit like me. They've actually found out, without the help of their education system, that colonisation is a shameful legacy of their culture, that what their government's doing is shameful. And so they've started to show more support. So I think that's the hope. Like, if we're looking at the end of this corridor for hope, that's one of the hopes. One other question that's come through, Kerry and Leilani, about media and how we have a problem with, we need to create a better media that is not capitalist and not racist, and how that can still be done and be true to the traditions and peoples. That's kind of a really big question. I don't know if either of you want to comment on media in regard of and linking it to racism and West Papua. Kerry, do you have any thoughts about media?
I think so. So we're only 2 minutes left.
Yes.
I think the currently it's strictly banned for the even from the national media as well. So yes. I think only source that we can rely on is the social media is playing a crucial role. This is not only issue about West Papua, but any other issues, because the mainstream is coming from the powerful agents. So I think the social media is really good. Yeah, because Indonesia never allows the international media get into the region.
Exactly. So it's not even an issue of how to improve the media. The fact is that it's very, very unsafe to be in a country with no media, even when they're bad. Lani, did you want to comment at all about media and how we can have more positive control?
I'm just wondering if you wanted to offer, I mean, I'll say something quickly, but if you wanted to offer some closing remarks around the media.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I want to just offer some closing remarks, because we're getting to that point. But one of them that, and Marty's just sent this through, which I think is important for everyone listening to know, is that this year, the National Network of West Papua Solidarity Groups is looking at a petition, because we can't really do actions at the moment against rainforest destruction and other such campaigns, but looking at a petition to Parliament around asking during the election year for MPs to pledge their support for West Papua to be heard, case to be heard at the Decolonisation Committee at the United Nations. So that sounds a bit complicated, but really it's just the UN, in order to get a recognition of your case and eventually a vote on the floor for your freedom, has to go through layers. And one of the layers is getting accepted as a decolonisation issue. It's been a huge issue in the Pacific. I know that Tahiti fought long and hard. I think they made it at some point. But and same with Kanaki, but with West Papua, watch out for our petition. Go to our West Papua pages. There's quite a few different ones for different groups, but we'll be carrying the petition, and we really want you to support it because we want our MPs to be put on the spot. When I was working at Parliament, there were about 15 MPs from mainly from Labour and the Greens who signed up to support, but they're all backbenchers. And when it comes to, even if they're in cabinet, they seem to be helpless in the face of, to be blunt, Winston Peters, Jacinda Ardern are not moving on this issue, not replying to us, won't meet with us, won't talk to us about it. So that's one of our problems that we have to keep pushing, especially in an election year. If we have an election, who knows what's happening, but just bear in mind that, you know, sign the petition. But I'd just like to, because we're coming to the end, I'd just really like to thank Kerry Tabuni for your clarity and courage, and Leilani for your analysis and leadership on this issue. We're very lucky that the next generation of younger people from mine, but led by Pacific leaders such as yourselves, Melanesian and Samoan Polynesian leaders, are actually here to educate us and educate everybody and stand strong. And that with your knowledge and wisdom and solidarity, we can all move forward to support West Papua. I hope you'll sign the petition. I hope you'll read Marty's book, See No Evil People. It's got the best coverage, and I hope you'll watch out for our events. And if you're Māori or Polynesian Wahine or Pacific Wahine, Leilani always wants to know you for for the events that we need to do. Is there a final comment from Kerry or from Leilani?
I just wanted to
ask Kerry. I might ask Kerry to do a close.
Yeah. Close? So
we'll do Leilani first, Kerry. So and then come to you so you can close.
So, social media as our new ocean highway. You know, it's the most democratic way we can communicate and the way we can connect at speed. So let's use it. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. Just acknowledge Kerry. It is courageous what you're doing, and we support you with all our hearts. To Catherine, to Maide, to all of the West Papua Action Network nationally, kia ora, and thank you for all that you do. There is much that people see and even more that you don't. So little steps make big steps. So thank you, everybody. One heart for Free West Papua. Merdeka.
Just before we go to Kerry's final words, because as a West Papuan, we need him to finish this. I'm just going to do what I need to do, which is thank everybody, thank our partners, particularly the community research team from AUT for the webinar support, and the volunteers, and everyone else who has made this whole amazing series. And it really has been incredible this week to watch it, and last week. For people, there will be recordings available via Facebook, YouTube, and website, depending on the intellectual property agreements everyone signed. This will be available, but particularly Facebook. It looks like we're coming to the end. So I better quickly say it's Decol 2020, the Facebook page. And Kerry, could you close?
I'd really appreciate you having me here and talk. And on my academic journey, raising the issues through my legal process in academic path, really hopeful the work that you do, and I hope everyone can come together as one, as we are fighting for coronavirus without races. We hold together as a human being. We are speaking, you are speaking to the survival of the human being, not only West Papuan. Thank you, everyone.
Wow.
Wow. Thank you.